question between you guys about this. How can interfaith communities create space for honest conversations about injustice, such as the suffering in Gaza, without compromising the relationship we built over many years?
You have to compromise a relationship you built over many years. But that's part of doing the hard work of interfaith, is we have to take risks. It could be broken. The hope is that the person on the other side is also willing to take the risk. Any relationship, any marriage relationship, you are opening yourself in a way that's risking your being with somebody else. This is what we're trying to do in Interfaith. We're truly opening ourselves, and that's risky. And it could hurt, and it could break. What are we doing if we don't? I think we can take risks. It might, yeah, and that's okay. This is why we need to invite the people who aren't here to the table, the people who are doing the Christian Zionists, remember, the Christian Zionists who are committing these genocides. I want to bring them to the table because we're not talking to them if they're not here. They need to be here to talk to them.
That would be a tough conversation for me. I definitely would go there. I'm not a big fan of interfaith. You probably got that sense. I think that it's a Protestant American construct that's mostly used to kind of make people feel good about themselves, and I just have no time for it. So I was really surprised to get this invitation. All my academic work is about getting past interfaith and getting to a different kind of space. And like I said, for me, those spaces are not in the organized hierarchy of religious organizations. They tend to be outside of those spaces. They tend to be at the encampments, which is where I saw what I would consider to be real interfaith work, where a lot of kids who identify as Jewish, Muslim, and who knows what else, it doesn't even matter. It just doesn't matter. What matters is that they're there, they're together, and they're fighting for justice and for human beings, for basic humanity, in the face of enormously repressive institutional power, including my own university. So for me, it's those kinds of spaces that I look to for inspiration, rather than kind of institutionalized official interfaith.
I'll add also, I think I have friends and colleagues who have not spoken to their own parents over Palestine, over this genocide. If this is not a red line to end a relationship, I don't know what is a red line. So I actually don't I completely agree with what you said, that I think that we need to do work in our own communities, and there are people that need to be able to speak to their own communities and move them forward. But especially, across communities, I think it is okay for this to be a red line.
I don't necessarily quite agree with the idea that interfaith is kind of dead or not really. I think we should emphasize. I think in my experience as a Muslim, talking to Christians, as I still do a great deal, a lot of them just don't know about the history of the Nakba, what happened in Palestine. There are many Christians of goodwill, who have good hearts, who we just share knowledge and educate them, we tell them what happened, will listen and learn and change their minds. They're not necessarily the other who we just write on because they're Zionist Christians. Sometimes Christians are just kind of just watch Fox News, they just don't know any better. They're people of goodwill who can be changed through knowledge and education, like you do. So this is kind of interfaith, I guess. So I think we can do a lot more than we are, just through communication, sharing facts of history, what really happened, because the news media probably won't tell us, but we can share that. That's what we do on Global Theology, is to get that information out there to a broader audience. It does change people's hearts and minds. I'm not saying it's going to make all the difference in the world, but in our small little ways, we can effect change, I think, in our communities. There's something to be said for that, I think.
And I would even say the people at the encampments are there because, many of them, at least the ones I knew, were there because of their religious convictions. Like the religious conviction took them to the encampment. Not all of them, of course, not all different religions. But I know many Christians, many Muslims, and many Jews who are at the encampment because of their faith. And they put that into action. But maybe we have a lot to learn as leaders from our community when they perform religious interfaith. Yeah.
Just to follow up on that, our faith traditions, all of them, Christian, Jewish, Muslim, call us to stand for justice and to stand up as the story you provided, even when it's difficult. But what does that really look like in practice when our allies or friends are directly or indirectly involved in these conflicts? People that I've known for many years, who've been to my house, I've been to their homes, who I broke bread with, that I traveled overseas with, and yet, we're no longer speaking. So what does that look like in reality?
I think we have to do what justice calls upon us to do, and whoever wants to be on that bus with us can, and whoever doesn't, I think that, again, if this is not a matter of simple theoretical disagreement. Like, these are people being starved to death and bombed to death and having their homes destroyed. So for me, like, a relationship, I think that when I say that we need to let Gaza transform us, I mean that this is a moment that has cast a question on so much in our society, and it should cast a question on many of these relationships and the work itself. And it's really hard to be like, what have we accomplished if someone that I broke bread with can't see my brothers and sisters, in Gaza as human enough to deserve sovereignty and food and self-determination. So, I think in reality it's an extremely painful experience, but I think that it's one that I think we need to be uncompromising about. I just don't see any other way. And I also think that we don't ask these same questions for other forms. If someone is part of the clan, right? Like if someone is sticking to any other extremely odious ideology, we don't make an exception and say, well, but I've known this person for years. It's okay that they're, they're in the KKK. I'm sorry, like at this point, Zionism is an ideology of hate, and committing to supporting a state that the entire world community has decided is committing a genocide means that you are affiliating yourself with an ideology of hate. So no relationship can or should withstand that, in my view.
This is where we might differ a little bit. The way I interpret Jesus' command to love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. When I heard your story about the Prophet Muhammad telling us to, be with the oppressor and the oppressed, but with the oppressor you restrain the oppressor, right? So at no point do you ever actually break the relationship. You will challenge the relationship, and it's hard. It's hard. I teach a course with a rabbi that I very much disagree with on this issue. And we very much talk about the fact that we very much disagree with this on this issue. I have lunch multiple times a year with another rabbi with whom I very much disagree with on this issue. They know my position. I know their position. It is not easy. It is really hard. I think God calls us to do hard things. It's not for everybody. It's not for everybody to stand in between and hold the tension between what I see as genocide and what somebody sees as defending the right to feel safe. That's not easy to hold together. I believe as a Christian I'm called to engage all of them. And it is really hard. And again, it's not for everybody. So I'm just to speak from my personal experience. I really struggle with this a lot. But I'm trying because I know a lot of people on both sides who just stop talking to each other. And as part of my push to open the doors that are hard, to open doors that are closed, to bring the people who don't want to be at the table together, I will at least refuse to cut somebody off. I say that as a Christian, I don't have enemies. I have people who think they're my enemy. But I actually don't have enemies. Nobody is my enemy. I guess Satan's my enemy. Besides that, Satan's my enemy. But there's no person that's actually my enemy. They're just people who think they're my enemy.
Let me just follow up on that really quickly. Maybe you can answer this. Those of us who've been involved in Interfaith for many years and have established wonderful relationships, as I mentioned, and I'm not talking about the Jewish community here, but I'm talking about the Christian community in particular, where they've done the good thing, they've done the right thing all these years, they supported us after 9/11, they supported us during the Muslim ban, etc. But on this issue, the Christian interfaith leadership itself has been silent. I had a good friend who I've known for 30 years, and we had a strong debate. I said, I'm done. And I think when I took such a strong stance, he finally kind of understood and was willing to talk more about it. But what do we do? You're saying don't break relations, but then, you stand for principles of justice, but here you're just not going to do it. So, any suggestions or advice? I know Iman's position is.
No, it's fine.
I guess to me, it's like, what is the point of it? Like, what has the dialogue brought us? Like, if on this basic point, this clear as day issue, we can't, like, at that point, it's like, okay, you don't see me as a human being. Like, there's no other way to justify what's happening in ISNA. So, like, why? Why maintain that relationship? What does that actually do? I disagree with my brother here in that I do have enemies. Like, the enemies of justice are my enemies. Like, I actually believe that in my faith tradition, we are called upon to fight justice. Anyone can stop being an enemy the minute that they are fighting for justice. Like, it's not inherent to a person. But if you are actively making blacklists of activists, you are actively doxing students. You are actively trying to get people deported. You are actively sending money to a genocidal army. You are actively, these aren't theoretical positions. These aren't views that people are holding. This is material support that people are preventing and materially repressing the opposition. That makes you an enemy, in my view. And like, I actually believe that my call to justice from God is to fight enemies of justice. In whatever, and I think, there are many people here in this room who are more learned on our tradition than I am. But in our tradition, the way I was taught is you try to change something with your hand, and if you can't, you try to change something with speech, and if you can't, then in your heart, and that's the weakest of faith. And in this case, as American Muslims especially, we're in a position of privilege. I'm not tenured at my job. I'm risking my job every day that I speak about Palestine publicly, and I do so every day. And you know why? Because that's what I can offer. I can't do anything with my hand. I can do something with my mouth. That is the obligation that God has given me. So I just don't.
I think I agree. I actually agree a lot with what my sister is saying here. And to answer your question, I think the reason I think this. All of our faiths are autobiographical, right? We can't just skip on that first. If you met me when I was 19, 20, I was a jerk. I was like, if you do not just if you don't believe in Jesus, you're going to hell. If you don't believe in my specific brand of Christian flavor, you are going to hell, and I'm going to tell you all about it. And I'm just going to hammer on your door, and I was just the worst kind of evangelical. And you know what broke me out of that? Meeting Muslims, meeting Jews, Hindus, living with them, understanding and learning. Disabused me of my position. So I think that's why I hold hope, is because I used to be that person. And by the grace of God and through continual repentance, I'm working on not being that person. But I think maybe that's why, because my own biography arc was like that. And that's probably why I still hold out this hope.
Just hear a final comment from Elizabeth, and then we'll wrap up.
I was just going to make a quick comment, a quick plug for my own faith tradition, which is education, which has already been, spoken of here a few times. But I have had profound experiences, transformative experiences with some of my students when I educate them about the history of the Nakba, about the history of American support for Israel. People don't even understand the really deep cultural and affective and religious attachments but much broader than just Zionism, and much broader than even Christian Zionism, but American attachments to the state of Israel, which are so deep. And that's actually one of the things I write about in my new book called Heaven as a Whole, because I'm looking into those attachments. And so I'm in favor of staying with the power of education and locating my hope in those transformative moments when students are able to see a bigger picture and step outside of themselves, even if just for a moment.
Thank you. Can we give a round of applause for the wonderful speaking here? Thank you, guys. At this point, we're going to conclude the program with a quick shoulder-to-shoulder update by Nina Fernandez. Nina Fernando.
I did prepare remarks. I think there was a misunderstanding. I have remarks, and I am so grateful for